let's talk about what is death. What does it mean to die?
That's the termination of your relationship with your particular physical body that you have at this present time. When you are retracted from this reality, okay, you go back up toward the origin of reality. You can be provided with a substitute body, another kind of terminal body that allows you to keep on existing.
With the same memories?
This is what religions... excuse me?
With a modicum of your memories before, or a complete eraser?
You can have... These memories can be retrieved. Nothing goes out of existence in the conspansive manifold. Your memories can always be pulled back out, if that's... But there's no reason to do that, usually. Okay? Why cling to memories of a world in which you are no longer instantiated? So there are certain automatic psychological things that happen on death, at the moment of death. And also you mentioned what happens after death. That's not quite appropriate, of course, because that's a temporal preposition. And when you're extracted from the terminal domain, you're no longer time-like. Now you're basically metatemporal. So everything changes. However, you exist that way right now. Arguably, all of your lifetimes, if you were to be reincarnated again and again and again, all of those reincarnations are meta-simultaneous. There is a sense in which they all occur at once in the non-terminal domain.
So when people talk about heaven, which I know you have your own views, a specific differentiated view I haven't heard before as to what heaven is, and even hell. When people talk about heaven, usually what they mean is something like reinstantiation of this body with probably a better hairline than I have, and
you got a great younger hairline.
Oh man,
mine.
But you should see Bernardo Kastrup, who I should put you in touch with. Have you heard of Bernardo Kastrup?
I've heard of Bernardo. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I think he was on an email distribution that I was on. I think it was one of Jack Sarfati's email distributions.
So who's that? Jack who?
Jack Sarfati?
Yeah.
Jack Sarfati is one of the hippies who saved physics.
Uh-huh.
You ever read that book?
Is he related to UFOs? Does he study UFOs?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I think he's working on, right now, he's working on metamaterials that will allow us to build spacecraft that emulate Tic Tacs. Heard of those Tic Tacs that
We're going to talk about that, man.
I mean, yeah, he's a gonzo physicist, right? But he's been around since the 1960s, and there are a bunch of other guys, like Sarag and Nick Herbert and Fred Allen Wolf and other people like this. There's a guy named David Kaiser, I think he's at MIT. He wrote a book called How the Hippies Saved Physics. And these were, non-locality and all the quantum woo you hear about sometimes came from these guys. But in reality, they had a lot of very productive thoughts. And in a way, the world we're living in now is an outgrowth of some of what they were thinking and doing in those days. Some of these guys are still around. I mean, not just Jack Sarfati, but you've also got other guys like, I know Nick Herbert is still there, and I know that Wolf is still there. Sarag is still there. These guys are on email distributions that Jack sometimes puts me on one of his distributions. And so
I want to talk to Jack at some point. I heard that I should talk to Jack. What I've been exploring recently is the topic of UFOs, because, like this podcast is about theoretical physics, consciousness, free will, and God. And it seems like UFOs, from our observations of them, break the laws of physics as we know. So a simple one is conservation of momentum. How can you move back and forth we have to assume a certain mass is associated with the craft?
Well, yes, and of course mass amounts to inertia, and that's a violation of inertia. You can't just suddenly turn on the baton like that.
Right, so that's what I've been exploring.
Unless you're dealing with a projection.
Right.
And right?
That's also called spoofing, I believe. Have you heard that term?
Yeah, I have heard the term spoofing, but you need a better theater of reality in order to explain what this kind of projection could be.
Okay, while we're here, man, let's talk about this. What are your thoughts on UFOs in general, as well as the recent disclosure movements? Is there anything about UFOs that you find convincing that they are, in fact, maybe us from the future, maybe associated with God or demons or angels, or just an advanced civilization visiting us in the same way that we house people at zoos. I mean,
Well,
animals
some
at
of
zoos.
they could be any or all of those things. There could be different kinds some kinds that come from the future, sometimes some kinds that come from another planet elsewhere in the universe, right? But they definitely, you've got too much reportage on them. There are too many people who are coming up with heartfelt stories about them. They can't possibly all be fake. Right? People aren't liars. If someone's going to risk his reputation and be called a nut by coming out and saying, I saw a UFO, you have to take that person a little bit seriously. Sure, there are scammers out there and people who are going to lie about it, but I don't think we could have this much reportage without actually having something to it. Right? So I think a lot of people are telling the truth about UFOs. That means they have to be explained, and there are a number of possible explanations corresponding to different kinds of UFO.
You know that fitness coaches can be expensive. That's why I was excited when Copilot Fitness approached us. It's one of those apps that when you see how easy it is, you wonder why wasn't it invented before? And I think that's because it's more than just an app. It's this whole experience of speaking to your coach, of communicating during, after, being held accountable. Man, oh man, is it fantastic. Like, I'm someone who doesn't need motivation to work out, and I still found it helps. My wife needs motivation to work out, and I've never seen her this excited to work out before. She thinks it's because you can do this at home or the gym. They personalize it for you. There's also a streak system, which makes it such that you don't want to skip workouts. As I'm writing this, my wife said in the background, I'm gonna beat you in it, babe. This is domestic rivalry at its finest. I love my coach. His name is Rod, and Rod is rad. He took his time with me, found out what I was looking for. My wife's coach, Samantha, took the time with her. I recommend this app wholeheartedly. So are you ready to feel fit and fabulous? Give Copilot a try. It was even listed by Forbes as the top-rated personal trainer app of 2023. Head to go.mycopilot.com/toe to get your 14-day free trial with your own personal trainer. That's go.mycopilot.com/TOE for your 14-day free trial.
You mentioned the word woo about 5 minutes ago. What I'm wondering is, did you used to have a conception of what you thought was woo? So, for example, telekinesis or psychic phenomenon, maybe when you were in your teens, that now, because of your development of the CTMU, you no longer regard it as incoherent mysticism?
Well, I mean, I have had a number of paranormal experiences and began having them at a rather young age. And that's one of the reasons I had to develop the CTM, to develop an extended picture of reality that would actually accommodate alternate states of being, alternate states of mind. And so that is, rather than dismissing the experiences that I had in the past, I've actually become more comfortable with it.
What are some of these paranormal experiences?
Well, psychokinesis, telepathy, lots of precognition in my case, out-of-body experiences, you name it. I don't know of a single kind of paranormal event that I haven't spontaneously experienced at one point or another.
Have you witnessed any UFOs on your own?
Well, yes, I have. All right. And I was basically up near, I was working for the U.S. Forest Service, and I was up near in central Montana, near Malmstrom Air Force Base, by the way, where they're known to have shown up. But I saw something in the sky and actually stood and watched it for 30 minutes until I got bored and drove away. And I was driving a U.S. Forest Service pickup truck, but literally stood there, leaning against the back of the truck, looking directly at it for a long, long time. Okay, it did not change shape. It did not change position. It was right up there in the sky over, they were called the Little Snowy Mountains. I was kind of in charge of this mountain range in Montana. And that's where it was. And it was huge. It was titanic. I mean, there was no missing it. I don't know if anybody else saw it or not. But yeah, it was up there.
What do you estimate its size to be?
Excuse me?
Sorry, what do you estimate its size to be?
You see, it's very, very difficult to tell because getting a distance fix on something like that is very, very hard. Could have been anywhere from 500 yards to 5 miles in diameter. So I don't know, but it was huge.
Was it one of the triangular
Nope.
UFOs, or was it
No.
a more disc-like?
It was oblate. It was it looked to me like an oblate spheroid. And one of the first things I thought was, well, this must be a lenticular cloud. And so I kept on looking at it to find out if it was, to see, okay, if it's a lenticular cloud, I'm going to see some sign of movement. There's going to be something there. It was nothing like that. This thing was totally solid metallic, and it did not change. I kept on staring directly at it to see if it would change. It doesn't change, do something. But it wouldn't. So, as I said, I stayed there for, until I was quite sure that there was no doubt about it, and then I just drove away.
Can you give me an example of another paranormal experience of yours, a specific one?
Just simply all kinds. Well, the first time I had an out-of-body experience, I was lying down, and I experienced. You ever hear of nocturnal paralysis?
Yeah.
Basically, I was lying down, and I woke up, and I, thought, so I better, maybe I'll get up and go to the bathroom or something. So I tried to move, and I couldn't. Immediately, I started to panic.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a wall next to me. So, I figured, what's going on? And I look over, there's a bookshelf next to me on the wall, right next to my head. That bookshelf was 4 feet above the ground. Okay? In other words, somehow I must have risen above my body. I couldn't figure out how this had happened. But anyway, I thought, oh my God, am I dead? What time is it? How long have I, if I'm dead, how long have I been dead? Suddenly I floated, I began to move. I floated in from the room that I was on into the kitchen of the house that I was in, turned a corner and looked directly at a clock that was on the stove there and saw the time. And at that point, I realized, this is, basically the middle of the night. And I woke up back up in my body. I mean, it took me a little bit, and I got control of my muscles, and I walked back in, and it was 1 minute later than it was when I looked at the clock. So, of course, now some people are very good at gauging time and figuring out what time it is, but that was an exact estimate of the time after I'd been asleep for some period of time. So, that was something. Of course, it was terrifying because the first time you experience this nocturnal paralysis, you are going to be free. But then many of these experiences after that.
Have you had any intimations of God speaking to you?
Well, now you're getting a little bit, yes, I have had religious caliber visions. Okay.
Now I'm getting a little bit wet.
Now you're getting a little bit personal. No, you're asking me to reveal some of the most personal details.
Right.
Okay.
If you want, you can.
I have too much experience with these despicable creatures called trolls that have been specializing in my case for this time. You admit that you had a paranormal experience, and suddenly these creatures
they're looking for any reason to dismiss you.
Crawling all over the internet, right, saying nasty things about you. And unfortunately, I don't know if you know anything about me, but I've been canceled. Me and my ideas have been canceled, despite the fact that they're totally provable. Been canceled for a long time because of the God thing, and also because people don't like IQ differentials. Okay, and so if there's an IQ differential, it's politically incorrect. And if you're talking about God and say God is mathematically provable on top of that, the trolls come out of the woodwork on you. Okay, and pretty soon people are reading the internet and they see all this troll nonsense, and they somehow get the idea, oh, wow, well, there's smoke, there's fire, so this guy must be like totally off the wall, and then they don't pay attention to you, or they think that it's somehow, your ideas are somehow tainted. And so this leads to what is called cancellation or cancel culture, which in my case has been going on for over 30 years, but somewhere between 30 and 40 years. And let me tell you, I'm sick of it. Okay? There is not an academic alive that can do a thing about anything that I've ever said or done. Nevertheless, I'm not invited to, conferences or symposia. I'm not invited to do media appearances. I mean, these are, things that I should have been able to, there are ways that I should have been able to spread the word about, my work and actually get it out there so that people could look at it. They were denied me. And so I'm a little bit, I don't like trolls. I don't like people that talk out of turn about things they don't understand. And there are a lot of those people out there. And unfortunately, it would be fine, I guess, if most people were able to distinguish between a troll and someone who actually knows what he's talking about. Most people can't. If the troll uses a little bit of language, well, I work at a university, and here's my opinion, it's all nonsense, okay? Then, people think, well, he says he's from a university, maybe he really is. All right? And this is, the problem. People can't distinguish between truth and falsehood, especially when it's, when it takes the form of internet noise.
If you enjoyed that clip, then the full podcast is out right now. You can click around here. Enjoy. Subscribe to Theories of Everything to get notified of upcoming podcasts, as there are new full-length podcasts every week on the topics of mathematics, physics, consciousness, free will, and AI.